Today we have with us Shalini Pillai, India leader, Global Capability Center at KPMG India. Shalini is based out of Bangalore, and she's taken out the time so graciously to share with us her learnings, observations about the GCC market. Shalini, one of the most interesting aspect about your profile is you've done your engineering and then you've moved on to also do your chartered accountancy. Would you want to tell us a little bit about your journey in a nutshell?
So, yes, being an engineer and then having done my CA certainly makes for a very interesting conversation starter. But those were early days. I started my career with Arthur Anderson, did my CA alongside them, uh, partially because I just enjoyed the work I was doing, and then jumped into the world of consulting, where my engineering training and my CA knowledge, I think, have held me in good stead. So I combine those to actually have been in the consulting space for now 32 years almost. So it's been a long, long time. At KPMG, I've played many different roles. For the last close to now 6 years, have been spearheading all of what we take to the GCC market in India, and actually what we try to target at a global level as well. I also have been on the board of our own GCC, which is KPMG Global Services. So it allows me to take a very near side view of how the model evolves and continues to evolve.
Shalini, when you mentioned about KPMG, GCC in India, and also there is KPMG KGS, right? That's a different arm. Can you tell us and help us understand a little bit about what is the typical engagement that your team focuses on uh, in India?
So pretty much across the GCC life cycle, right from talking to global organizations when they're still sitting onshore evaluating the model, our journey starts way back then, helping them understand the difference between insourcing and outsourcing, the merits of the GCC model versus using a third party service provider. What kind of a hybrid model would make work best for them? Our journey actually starts there, and hence helping new players come in, establish their GCCs, set up, scale up, and build. We do a lot of work there through to working with a very large base of existing GCCs who are here in the country. Depending on where in that journey they are, Chantel, it could be helping them revisit their strategy, their operating model, figure out what are the tweaks required to help them actually take the GCC to the next level, what the roadmap ahead could be like. So, whether it's strategy and operating model, it could be anything along the technology spectrum, helping them get more digitalized, helping them embed technology, set up deep tech COEs. It could be along their risk and governance aspects. So, risk advisory is another big area. Workforce related stuff. So, everything to do with preparing for the future of workforce is another large theme that we work with GCCs on. And of course, in all of this, right from setup to scale up, there are tax implications. So, providing them the tax advisory inputs they need along that journey is another big space. So, pretty much all of what KPMG delivers as a full services, professional services firm, we take to market.
Interesting. Shalini, over the last few years, there's a lot of talk about GCCs, right? We see a lot of consulting firms also coming up who are helping global companies set up based in India. So, how competitive is this space as of today? Do you see like a big difference 6 years ago and right now?
Of course, it's buzzing just now. I mean, you open the newspaper every day, there is a new article, and there's a new vendor who's trying to get into that space. There's a new buzz. Every state in India is talking about the GCC model and how they want to get to be the next destination of sorts. So, there certainly is a buzz that's, I would say, much louder than it has ever been. The model itself, Chantel, has been around for a long time. Some of the early GCCs were set up 20, 25 years ago. So it's been around for a long time. I set up my first, those days we called it shared service centers, which then took a global role. So my first shared service center was in the early 20s that I set up for a organization in the oil and gas space. So it's a model that's been around for really, really long. But today there certainly is a lot of action around it, because the model has evolved quite significantly, and there is excitement, especially having seen the number of GCCs set up, grow, scale up, making the kind of impact that they're making. A whole bunch of others who actually want to come in and actually establish the model for themselves. So there is a lot of action and across the ecosystem, not just new GCCs coming in, but the service provider space, the startup space, academia gearing up to support with the talent that this market requires.
So could you give us a practical instance as to why are these companies now looking at India, so at setting up their base in India, right? Their capability centers in India.
So, in my mind, actually, Chantal, I think COVID was quite a tipping point for this model. A couple of things that happened, and it's hard to always pinpoint to one factor, but I think there are a few that contributed. Uh, the fact that through a lockdown, businesses not just managed, but they flourished and they thrived, and hence the eye opener that one could actually get work done remotely, and it worked beautifully. Secondly, the frantic pace at which global organizations adopted and embraced technology just went up several fold. Everyone was trying to look at how can we leverage new technology models to actually get work done. A combination of that, if you look at what India then offered, was a significant, sizable, scalable tech talent pool, which one cannot ignore because it's really unparalleled if you compare it to any other location. Secondly, the fact that people were anyway offshoring and outsourcing to India. So the India market, the talent, the fact that you could get it done remotely was a given. As organizations started adopting technology themselves, the recognition that, hey, maybe, there is merit in us now bringing and doing some of this remotely from India, but doing it ourselves because we've also moving up the maturity curve from a digital and technology standpoint. So it's a combination of those where we saw a whole bunch of technology centers, tech hubs, getting set up, organizations trying to look at how they can embed technology across their business value chain and actually leverage that using the GCC model. So, to me, COVID really changed a bunch of things. And since then, we have seen a regular, steady, growing flow of GCCs and global players who are coming into the country to say, hey, you know what? Maybe there are large elements of our business, of our core technology that we could now build capability in India and do this ourselves. Of course, they don't do that entirely by themselves. They're happy to work collaboratively with ecosystem partners to create a nice hybrid model that works for them. And the story is different from one to another. It's very organization specific.
Did you see this happening? Like, did you foresee this in, say, 2018?
Yes, one saw this coming because slowly and steadily, technology has begun to impact core business. And as that technology footprint in a business value chain grew, the opportunity of what else you could do remotely only grew. If I go back to the early 2000s, like I said, there were shared service models being set up then too. uh, and one of the reasons, if you look at early days of GCC, what we call GCC today, it was really born under the IT enabled services era. NASCOM coined the ITES, IT and ITES sector. It was IT enabled. It really meant that work that could be IT enabled, that could be done remotely, is what gave birth to this industry, so to speak. The early days saw a lot of what was relatively standardized that could be automated and moved to India start moving. So, finance, HR, IT, some of these processes were the early functional adopters, so to speak. So one has seen this steadily progressing. If you look at where GCCs are today and where they're likely to be, it's increasingly core and core processes. It's no longer support functions and support process.
Okay, so PNL driven activities is also a focus from India. It's no longer support, it's no longer back office.
No, very much so. In fact, if you look at the whole construct of the GCC model, players are looking to adopt it to look at how else can we not just impact and improve our bottom line and profitability, but there's a huge focus on what else can we do in India that's going to enhance our top line actually and make a direct revenue impact on the back of things like customer experience processes that are getting driven from here, core product innovation that's happening out of here, the ability to analyze data and mine data in a way that you can actually enhance your revenue in a way that was unimaginable a few years ago. So with a lot of focus on revenue enhancement, top line for an organization, and looking at, of course, ways to improve profitability, the scope of functions has only grown larger and larger.
We're talking about AI, right? There's this whole conversation about building $1 billion company, and your team will just be 10 or 20 or 30. There's no need to have thousands of people for $1 billion company. And we've seen this with a lot of fintechs in Europe, and Salesforce recently also said that, hey, they're not even hiring for any engineers. Now, when we're talking about GCCs, we see a lot of hiring happening in India. Is it still going to be people centric, say 10 years down the line?
Like I said, when 20 years ago we were setting up a finance shared service center, because we were consolidating it on the back of those days just basic ERP functionality, the term of lights out processing for finance was doing the rounds. People were concerned to say that as you consolidate and set up these shared service centers, what's going to happen to finance skills and resources? And I'm talking 25 years later, you still need finance resources, although there's a lot of work that today you wouldn't do like you did way back then. There's a whole lot of automation, there's a bunch of things that have disappeared, but there are newer areas where finance resources are being deployed, and finance as a function is very much around working to embrace what the new technology platforms allow them to. So, in my mind, you could argue whether it will be lights out processing and this will disappear. I think 10 years down, we're still going to need people for sure. But even within the GCC model, as you've seen the model evolve, there's one thing for sure, it has gotten leaner in terms of the way it gets set up. The way you set up your center 20 years ago or even 10 years ago is not how you do it today. It's no longer large armies of people. It is a people intensive business, but it's a lot more deliberate. Organizations who are setting up GCCs today don't come in wanting to do it all themselves. They're quite happy to leverage the partner ecosystem and cherry pick areas that they absolutely want to build capability in themselves, while leaning on other vendors or vendor partners who can actually do these services, provide it very efficiently given their scale and volumes. So it's a nice hybrid model. Technology is for sure changing that. You would do more and more with less and less in times to come. But there's also a shift in the way you're deploying resources. You would not necessarily need them for a lot of transactional processing stuff, which increasingly will get automated. But analyzing and innovating and driving new platforms to do things is what we will see more and more of in times to come. The second I'd like to highlight is, while everyone's talking about AI and automation, we have some time to go before this force takes over and everything's going to magically change. Let's not forget that a lot of organizations are still struggling with basic building blocks, be it their ERP platforms, be it their data structures, be it just simple cleansing of your core plumbing that sits below an organization, and that's going to take a while. We need to get a bunch of those in place before we're really ready to embrace AI and drive real impact. So there's a fair bit of work to be done. But in my mind, it will still be people centric, less people intensive.
People centric, less people intensive. Interesting. How do they think between, say, India, Philippines, Mexico, Poland? How do they differentiate?
So, firstly, the question on why India and India versus other countries, I think a couple of points there. A, we are seeing this model to be increasingly like a network of centers. So, most global organizations do have multiple centers. India continues to dominate as the largest of their centers, and that's simply because of what India offers in terms of scale, in terms of spread and depth of talent, specifically tech talent. I do believe that's quite unparalleled compared to any other location. You do have locations emerging in Eastern Europe, you see them closer home to North America and in Southeast Asia, and they are very compelling propositions, but for select niche smaller hubs. You may choose to do those, and organizations are choosing those to be A, nearer home, B, to leverage on talent from a language speaking capability. It could also be, and you do see some good tech talent sitting in some of the East European centers as well. But honestly, when we look at centers that and the vision people have of large scale and growing their centers, then what India offers, nothing else comes anywhere close. So when they're making their choice of location, there's all of this that helps or that contributes to that decision making. Coming to organizations who come in and set up shop today, most of them, or a very large number of them, are already leveraging India in an outsourced manner. So they're working with service providers. It is the recognition that as they move up the digital maturity journey, there's a lot they're doing internally which they can very easily build on and unlock value that's quite significant for the organization. So the opportunity to pick a few things and bring them in house and then create those deep capabilities is what's driving the GCC model. That, along with, of course, data privacy, some of those considerations to say, hey, maybe we can bring this in, create some deep capabilities and are going to hold us in good stead for the long haul. And that's what's driving them to set up their centers here. When they do that, they're being quite wise and deliberate to say anything that's very, very core, we will do ourselves. Stuff that's getting to be repetitive, that is more standardized, that is quite mechanical, we could leverage a third party because they have the scale and the ability to run this at a very different degree of efficiency. So that's how they make their decision.
If someone once was considering starting a capability center in India or a shared service in India, and what is the typical time frame needed right now, and uh, how long does the entire decision process takes, and what are the questions they typically ask you? What are their worries?
In terms of timelines, these centers, depending on the size and scale, your first few hundred people can be up and standing in 6 months. Now, timelines is a very subjective question. I have seen organizations where, because of some the way the global parent will make decisions, it could take a long time before you really get things off the ground. And it brings me to an important theme on global sponsorship and vision for why they're setting up this center. Why are you doing what you're choosing to do, and what do you define as your vision for this global capability center or global hub that you are creating? The sponsorship and the keenness in many ways also sets not just the tone but the pace at which you'll go about setting it up. So it's an important aspect. Timelines could vary. Today, when you do this collaboratively within the ecosystem, it can be done as quickly as in 6 months you can get a center up and running.
Do you see FOMO in clients?
Oh, certainly. We see it a lot. I mean, clients come in knowing that, oh, my competition is all here, and some of the later entrants, they say, are we too late to this party? Or, there are others who've been around for much longer. We actually get calls from clients onshore who say, oh, some of our closest competitors are there, and we're now wondering why aren't we already in India, or how should we be approaching this? So there certainly is that very acute awareness of where is my competition, what are the models they're adopting, why is it working for them, or what's the upside they've seen, and then why am I not moving into this in a greater hurry?
Shalini, have you seen any of your clients, without taking anyone's name, who has actually moved to India and has seen a significant upside compared to their competitors? And what are those upsides?
Lots of them. I think pretty much in every sector you see that. Players who've come in who've actually created a, a very robust backbone to run their global business on in a way that it enables them to plug in new acquisitions, to actually cast a wider net on the markets, to drive tech adoption even more efficiently because it's being done in a centralized manner out of their GCC, to roll out new platforms, and all of this resulting in some pretty sizable savings, both in cost as well as trying to make that impact from an innovation perspective on their top line for their parent organization. You name the sector, you see examples across the board.
I was just doing some research. 65% of the large Fortune 500 companies have their GCCs in India, right? And I think now it's going to be the next level folks who are looking at India. So how will this pan out, say 10 years or 20 years? How do you think about it?
20 years is a long way off to start predicting. It'll be interesting to look at what technology is going to look like in that span. But I think the next 10 years, you'll certainly see the model continue to evolve itself. If you look at 5 years ago, the way centers were being set up, they look different from the way it's coming today. And with technology, that's going to continue to change. But fundamentally, because of the just the if you look at the global demography, if you look at the working age population across countries, if you look at what India offers in that context, it continues to be significant, even if you project it 10-15 years out. So the model itself, I think, is going to see another good 10 years at a minimum. It will continue to evolve beyond that. The next 3 to 5 years is going to see a lot more players continue to come in and look at what to do, while existing players are beginning to reflect on their models to say, are our models fit for purpose? I mean, those who set up shop 20 years ago, they ask themselves a question, and we get asked this to say, if we set up shop today, how would we look? The answer is you'd not look anything like you do today, because in today's context, the way you'd go about building and setting up your GCC is very different from how you did it 20 years ago. So the point I'm making, Chantel, is that it's not just the new guys coming in, but existing models are getting disrupted. People are constantly questioning to say, am I fit for purpose? Should I be tweaking my operating model? Is there stuff that I'd rather have a third party do versus trying to do it all myself? What else can I be doing? Do I have the best of technologies? Should I be replacing some platforms entirely? There's so much changing in the business world that their operating models are changing. So the avatar that you'll see GCCs take will constantly evolve, but I think we're going to continue to see a lot of action in this space for sure.
When we're talking about cities, right, Bangalore still hubs almost 40% of the GCCs. Bangalore has been criticized for its infrastructure, but why do we still see a lot of GCCs looking at Bangalore? That's one. And what do you think about Gujarat? They have a new policy come up, and how are you looking at it and the opportunities in that space?
Interesting and very contentious as well. Because of the central government focus on GCCs, which is soon to be a pillar under the Viksit Bharat program as well, there is a national focus on GCCs. So pretty much every state is looking at trying to understand what could this mean for them and how do they get themselves on the map visibly as a GCC destination. In my mind, Bangalore was an early starter. It has, as our tech capital of the country, as the startup hotbed for the country, and it has some very strong fundamental research base that sits here. If you look at the PSU base, you look at the aviation defense base, the biotech base, all of that actually is also significant. So when you look at Bangalore as a destination, the scale and depth of talent, tech talent and techno functional talent, it is really quite significant. And it's been built over years and years of focus. So it is significant, which is why, despite uh, concerns around infrastructure, you still see a lot of players gravitating towards Bangalore. And I see that continuing because of the sheer advantage that it offers. As opposed to commenting on any one tier two location, what I'd rather say, Chantel, is that for tier two locations, it is certainly an interesting model to start looking out and building for, because you do have talent sitting in these tier two locations who would love the opportunity, and there is talent that can be skilled to service this space. But I do believe that we have to keep an eye out for a few other factors to actually get the right talent there to service the GCC model. It has to be the right tech talent. You do want it in new emerging tech areas, and hence the skilling has to be focused in that space. Again, if I go back to the point I made on, it's not a GCC standalone model, is a hybrid model. All of the tier two locations need to focus equally, if not even more, on building the tech ecosystem first. If you have the right technology ecosystem with tech providers in there investing, building talent, the GCC opportunity will follow. But you do need the tech ecosystem that needs to be very robust and very much in place. So, to me, there are a bunch of things. I know a lot of tier two locations, a lot of states are working on their GCC policies. Some have been rolled out, others will. to attract new players. But fundamentally, the GCC model is premised on technology and it's premised on talent. Those are the two most significant factors. All else, whether it is policy, whether it's cost differentials, whether it is uh, all else that you can provide, they are important, but getting the right technology ecosystem and the right tech talent funnel to actually fuel into this model is really, really critical. So those are very important. And again, let's not forget this is a young, buzzing employee pool, a young talent. They're also equally attracted by a very nice, vibrant social ecosystem. The socio-cultural scene is also something you can't ignore. That's what attracts them to some of our key metros because they see that vibrancy in the social ecosystem. So equally important. And then all else, right? You need the right real estate, you need the infrastructure, global connectivity, lots of reasons. I don't want to oversimplify it, but because there are lots of elements that go into building that ecosystem. But talent and technology will be at the core.
So well explained. Do you see Australia, Middle East also companies from there looking at India? Because right now it's US heavy.
I'll answer with the second question first because yes, US has the lion's share of the GCC market. It's very sizable and it's very significant. Close to 60% of the GCCs are US headquartered. Having said that, today there is very little other regions that are not leveraging the model, whether it's parts of Europe, the UK, Australia, Japan. You may have seen a post recently on the Japanese GCCs that have set up and growing from the Middle East region. So there certainly is very few regions. It's only those where for very strict language reasons, but otherwise it's a model well adopted and embraced by many others and growing. Some of the later adopters are waking up to saying we need to look at the model closely, and we're seeing that happen for sure. So, absolutely, currently a US dominant play, and just given the size of that country, it will always dominate. But we are seeing this across other locations as well.
What has been the impact of, President Donald Trump on this sector? So, is this going to impact the space by any chance?
uh, President Trump and the implications, hard one. Everyone's waiting and watching to see where this is going to land. If you ask me, the fundamentals of what the model and what India offers is here to stay. That ain't going away anywhere. So, if you're a large growing organization, you need to impact and improve your bottom line and try to enhance your top line. You need to embrace technology at a scale and pace like never before. Your answer is India, and your answer is the GCC model in India. So, that ain't going away anywhere. You may play it down, you may not be as vocal about it, but it is a model that clearly offers a very distinct competitive advantage to any global organization, one that's very hard to ignore. So, in my mind, some of this noise will come and go. It will quieten down things for a bit, but at the grassroots level, we are seeing action. We are seeing a lot of interest. We are seeing growing number of players coming in because the fundamentals don't change.
If I'm a CFO or if I'm a finance guy, I'm supposed to be a CFO, say in a couple of years. What should I be doing? Everyone says, "Hey, upscale, upscale, upscale," but what's a definition of upscale according to you?
I would say when you look at your core finance processes, to be very acutely aware of what technologies are changing or redefining those processes. See, at one level, one could argue and say that an invoice will always be an invoice and a PO, there will be a PO. But what has changed, the technologies of how you actually uh, raise those, process them, and kind of predict volumes, predict how that's working in a business system. So it continues to be what is happening to those fundamental processes. Are those changing rapidly given technology? And having an eye on that becomes important. If you look at implications of blockchain on the finance processes, I mean, firstly, let's step back a bit. You look at today, you don't even really talk of a payable process standalone in a silo. You look at it in a wider procure to pay kind of parlance. The minute you look at a procure to pay, a finance professional is equally watching out for wider changes in the procurement landscape and ecosystem to understand the finance implications thereof. If you look at blockchain technology, which is actually embracing your vendor systems and looking at it as one continuous large platform along which you transact, it changes definitions. So while fundamental definitions of finance processes remain, it is the value chain that is expanding, that is getting digitalized, that is getting integrated, not just within an organization, but with your vendor partner ecosystem as well. So it's being acutely aware of some of those changes and how technology is driving those. I think that's what upskilling really will mean over here.
So well explained. I mean, Shalini, thanks a ton for your time.